Another challenge, a set of stone columns, but I've got good material to work with this time. Beautiful Pennsylvania sandstone mostly. It has a very nice color and texture, and it cuts nicely under the chisel. An important consideration when I need so many cornerstones. Stone columns are essentially nothing but corners. That's it. The easiest way to build them is to set the stones down flat, but the most cost-effective way is stand the stones up on end, like this. Check it with a level and carry on. I alternate each stone to give it some stability. As I go, I like to keep the stone a bit damp. The mortar bonds better that way. I lay down a good bed of mortar to fill in any voids. And I like to have the stone reach towards the middle of the column as much as possible. Then another bed of mortar. And another course of stone. Every course of stone should overlap the one below it, but the corners go quick. This material is simply wonderful. The faces of some stones are irregular and jagged. Keeping the wall straight can be a challenge, but move it around a bit and it's close enough. The client wanted a flat piece of paving stone inlaid in the front of the column. I thought this was going to be more difficult than it was. I simply tied it in with stone all around it. But the corners are the most essential feature. I like to dry fit my stone as much as possible before I use any mortar. It makes for better and simpler joints. Between the corners I use stones of various size to make sure everything is bound together. But it really does come down to the corners. Once it gets out of square, the entire column is ruined. Usually I don't like using shims in my work, but here it's almost necessary. It's been dry for the past few weeks, but this wind is bringing in some nasty weather. A little over halfway done, and it's not looking terrible. It's helpful having a big pile of rocks from which to pick and choose. I saved the ugliest stone to go in the middle of the column. But here's the rain. This has been a fun project so far, but the hour drive to work is hit or miss. Hello, Pennsylvania. Hello, bad traffic. But eventually I come rolling up the hill past the old barn. Turning into the driveway, I just love seeing my progress first thing. I jump right into it. I set a corner. Lay mortar. Set the stone. Check the level. And then I notice it. I didn't alternate the cornerstone. That's what happens when you try to rush. Well, rip it off, put down another one. Build up to it and set the next one. It's out a little bit, shove it in. I hate working from a ladder, but I really can't avoid it. Every stone needs to be carried up one at a time. Still got plenty of stone, but corners are starting to become scarce. Laugh if you want. Well, you're a nice one. But if you've worked by yourself for 15 years, you're kind of ugly. There's a good chance you'd start talking to rocks too. I could shim this, sure. But I prefer cutting it when possible. When I'm doing new work, I usually will use a little bit of Portland cement. For this, I simply take my standard line mortar, which I always use in historic work, and lace it with Portland. I mix it well, and it's ready to go. Well, I'd better start to think about the cap now. I pull out some nice sandstone and start cutting. Wait, well, this is new work. Yes, this is something else I never do with historic work. I never use power hammers. As I cut them, I set the capstones on the tailgate of my truck and get them to about the same thickness. I square up the ends. Well, they don't look like much now, but I think they'll work fine on the column. Once I mortar them in, anyway. Now to point my joints. In my historic work, I usually leave recessed joints, so as much of the mortar can cure as possible. This isn't necessary here, but old habits die hard. Coming up the next day, I'm anxious to see how they turned out. Yeah. I expected the mortar to be pretty bright, but I'll fix this using another thing I never use in historic work. I wet down the columns. And break out the muriatic acid. Nasty stuff. I brush it on and let it work. After a bit, I rinse it off and it's done. My goal is to roughly match the columns on the house. But be warned, acid will destroy historic stone. Here, though, it's a real lifesaver. It draws out the natural color and texture of the creek sand that I use. Oh yeah, I can take out the shims. I don't need them anymore. All the stone is bound together, tight. The acid makes a huge difference. These columns are almost 10 feet tall. Not so bad. Now to finish up, I'll throw down a pair of low dry stacked walls, and that'll complete the look. After the client puts on his gas lights, we're done and ready to roll out to the next one.